Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support. And also, the Search for the Ancient Bauble Kickstarter has launched, so make sure you go check that out. The Kickstarter campaign will last for 30 days, and after that, the playmat will no longer be available for purchase. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. So, spoiler season continues on with a lot of exciting things, including the reveal that there is a venture into the dungeon mechanic, though we don't know exactly what that is. So if you'd like to hear my thoughts on it and my speculations, make sure you check that episode out. And then also yesterday, we got a new fantastic Boros commander that's all about slinging multicolored spells and making a lot of golems to take over the game. And this morning, the spoilers just kept coming with the fantastic Lannis Cryptozoologist. Or as I like to call it, Lannis Crypto Clueologist, because this is a clue-based commander. This is definitely one of my favorite commanders from Modern Horizons 2, so if you haven't seen this episode yet, make sure you check it out. But not before you watch this episode where I talk about if this card, Voidmere, should be banned in Commander. Now, why exactly would this little 2-mana artifact be considered for a ban? Well, let's jump into it. So, Voidmere is an artifact that costs 2, and it says whenever a player casts a spell, if no colored mana was spent to cast it, counter that spell. So this actually took me a few times to read through to understand the potential impact and implications of this card. First off, if a player casts a spell for free, having spent no mana on it, therefore no colored mana on it, that spell is countered. So this does shut off free spells. So Ornithopter and Rograk, be scared. Just kidding, but seriously. But anyways, of course, there are more impactful free spells out there that will be affected by this. And by saying that, I probably invoked the Wrath of Rog, and that's a very scary thing. Anyways, we'll get to those free spells here in a bit. Secondly, if a player pays to cast a spell but they don't use any colored mana, well then that spell is also countered. So essentially, you can't just use colorless mana on a spell. So if you say have a Soul Ring and you want to tap it to cast a Mind Stone, well unfortunately you can't just use that mana for it. Now that might be slightly inconvenient, but for many decks all you have to do is just use a mana from another source that produces colored mana. So whether that's using another mana rock that makes colored mana like one of the diamonds, or simply a basic land like a forest, then yes, you can just pay for that spell and it's not going to get countered. You're not prevented from using colorless mana on spells, you just need to make sure that at least one colored mana is used on every single one of your spells. So if this is just a minor inconvenience for those situations and it's a hard counter for free spells, well then what's the problem with this card and why would it be considered for a ban? Well, to illustrate that, let's talk about another card that actually is banned with Iona Shield of Emeria. Iona Shield of Emeria is a 7/7 angel with flying that costs 6 white. When it enters the battlefield, you choose a color and your opponents can't cast spells of the chosen color. So Iona is a 9-mana card that can shut down one color. So if you're playing a mono blue deck and a player got Iona out and they said blue, well then you couldn't cast any of your blue spells. You could cast colorless spells such as artifacts, but you couldn't cast any of your blue ones. Now I have previously given my thoughts on the Iona ban, which happened back in July of 2019, so yeah, quite some time ago. But before we get to my thoughts on it, let me share the Rules Committee's reasoning for it. They said, Iona Shield of Emeria creates a negative experience for many players without the benefit of a positive application. We had previously considered its high mana cost sufficient to keep it from getting played, but deeper investigation demonstrated many ways of getting it onto the battlefield without paying that cost. Iona Shield of Emeria is an exemplar as the type of card which creates an experience we wish to discourage, namely shutting players out of games. So, with that all in mind, I want you to take another look at the 9-mana Iona Shield of Emeria. Again, the mana cost is 6 white. Quite restrictive, one might say. In fact, you need a deck that has white to play it. Now I would like you to take a look at Voidmere. Its mana cost is 2. Not a restrictive cost at all, and it can be put in any deck. In pretty much any game you play, if this is in your hand, you can get it down on turn 2. And if you've got a Soul Ring, you can get it down on turn 1. Now, why would this be a problem, and why am I comparing this card to Iona? Well, there are these things called colorless commanders. So, whether it's Kozilek the Great Distortion, Karn Silver Golem, or Hope of Girapur, well, everything in your deck is colorless. The lands that you are using are going to be tapping for colorless. So if you are playing a colorless deck and someone gets Voidmere out, you are completely shut out of the game. And this can happen on turn 1. To quote the Rules Committee again, an exemplar as the type of card which creates an experience we wish to discourage, namely shutting players out of games. This card can shut a player out of the game before the game even starts for them. So I would love to hear the argument as to why Iona was a problem and Voidmere isn't. Again, a 2-mana artifact that can go in any deck versus a 9-mana angel that has a very restrictive casting cost. Now the first thought might be, well, Iona can be your commander, so that's why. Iona wasn't banned because a lot of people were using it as their commander. It was used in the 99. And it wasn't even used in many decks at all. Another thought might be, well, Iona affects more players because there are more monocolor decks out there than colorless decks. And yes, that is true. But that doesn't mean that monocolored players should be held in a higher regard or cared for more than someone who's playing a colorless deck. Again, the quote doesn't mention the type or number of players, it just says, namely shutting players out of games. So if that's an experience that the Rules Committee doesn't want to happen, well then Voidmere would have to be banned. Now if you haven't seen my old episode on my opinion about the old Iona ban, well, here it is. I very much am against that ban. So although I am pointing out the connections between Voidmere and Iona, I am not trying to say on this episode that I think that Voidmere should be banned. In fact, I'm trying to say the opposite. Just as Voidmere should not be banned, Iona shouldn't. There are plenty of different ways to shut players out of games that are not banned. There are an incredible amount of inconsistencies as to why certain cards are banned and why some are not. Cards like Winter Orb, Stasis, and Armageddon can shut players out of games. So can cards like Void Winnower, Jin-Gitaxias, and Mindslaver. And the list could keep going on and on and on with all the other cards that comparatively should be banned. The bannings don't follow specific guidelines, it's just picking and choosing. The Rules Committee doesn't like Iona, so she's gone. At the end of the day, my point is this. Voidmere is going to be one of those types of cards that helps point out inconsistencies with what types of cards get banned and what don't. It's not going to be banned, and I'm not saying it should. What I'm saying is that it doesn't make sense for Iona to be banned and this one not to be. Again, this one is 2 mana and can go in any deck, and Iona is 9 mana with a restrictive casting cost. So at the end of the day, I guess what I'm saying is, hashtag free Iona. Okay, off my soapbox now. Back at the beginning of the episode, I did say that I would talk about the free spells that Voidmere could potentially be impacting in Commander. So first up, Voidmere can of course counter Pact of Negation, which is fantastic. Pact of Negation is a 0 mana counter target spell, but at the beginning of your next upkeep, pay 3 blue if you don't lose the game. Now you can still cast your Pact of Negation if Voidmere's on the battlefield, but yeah, that's going to be countered, which is ironic because it's just countering a free counter spell freely, which is hilarious. Speaking of which, it's going to be preventing players from casting cards like Fierce Guardianship and Force of Negation for free. Fierce Guardianship says, if you control a commander, you may cast this spell without paying its mana cost and counter target non-creature spell. And then Force of Negation says, if it's not your turn, you may exile a blue card from your hand rather than pay this spell's mana cost. Counter target non-creature spell, if that spell is countered this way, exile instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard. Now, obviously, players with these can still cast them, but they can't cast them for free, making them much less effective because now they're essentially just, bad counter spells. Like a counterspell that's worse than cancel, which is funny. Alright, next up, Voidmere also shuts off Cascade, so things like Bloodbraid Elf, Apex Devastator, and Maelstrom Nexus, look out. Bloodbraid Elf has haste and Cascade. When you cast this spell, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card that costs less. You may cast it without paying its mana cost, put the exiled cards on the bottom of your library in a random order. Basically, you get something slightly smaller for free off the top of your library. But with Voidmere in play, you're not getting that anymore. I mean, you still get to Cascade, but when you go to cast the card, you're casting it for free, so it's countered. So this is very funny against Apex Devastator, which has Cascade, 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 so this is going to be countering 4 spells instead of 1. And it can stop even more spells with Maelstrom Nexus, which says the first spell you cast each turn has Cascade. So no free spells for you. This also shuts off cards that you actually pay for in a way, though, with Suspend cards. Wheel of Fate has Suspend 4 for 1 in a red. So basically, rather than cast this card from your hand, you pay 1 in a red and exile it with 4 time counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, remove a time counter. When the last is removed, cast it without paying its mana cost. And then each player discards their hand, then draws 7 cards. Or not when you've got Void Mirror in play. Essentially, the player suspending the card is paying a little mana to cast the spell on a later turn. But again, since on that turn when the last counter is removed, you're casting it without paying its mana cost, Void Mirror counters it. So this is also going to counter really powerful cards like Living End and Profane Tutor. Living End says each player exile creature cards from their graveyard, then sacrifices all creatures they control, then puts all the cards they exile this way onto the battlefield. So like a mass reanimation, get rid of everything on the board kind of card. But again, Void Mirror says no. And Profane Tutor says search your library for a card, put that card in your hand, then shuffle. So basically a demonic tutor that is suspended instead of cast. And again, Void Mirror says no to that as well. And with these suspend cards in particular, there's no other way to actually cast them, so they're stuck. And Void Mirror can also host certain commanders like Joyra of the Get-To, Maelstrom Wanderer, and the very popular Golos Tireless Pilgrim. Joyra is all about suspending all the cards in your hand, whether those are Eldrazi or whatnot, and now you know what, you're not going to be able to do that. I mean, you can still suspend them, but if Void Mirror's in play when those time counters are removed, they're countered. And then Maelstrom Wanderer says creatures you control have haste, and it's got Cascade, Cascade. And again, with Void Mirror, cascading can happen, but you can't cast them. And then Golos Tireless Pilgrim has pay 2 in Wooburg, exile the top 3 cards of your library. You may play them this turn without paying their mana cost. So you can still activate that and exile those cards, but you can't cast those for free. Or I mean, you can, but they're going to be countered. So yeah, Void Mirror can shut down a good amount of things in Commander, and actually there's some combos with it as well. Knowledge Pool has Imprint. When it enters the battlefield, each player exiles the top 3 cards of their library, and whenever a player casts a spell from their hand, that player exiles it. If that player does, he or she may cast another non-land card exile with Knowledge Pool without paying that card's mana cost. So basically, whenever you cast something, you're going to be casting something else, but for free. And since Void Mirror says you can't cast things for free or they're going to be countered, they are countered. So everyone's locked out from casting spells. And then Possibility Storm says whenever a player casts a spell from their hand, that player exiles it, then exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a card that shares a card type with it. That player may cast that card without paying its mana cost, then that player puts all cards exiled with Possibility Storm on the bottom of their library in a random order. So you cast something and you get something else off the top of your library for free, but you can't cast it for free because, you know, Void Mirror. So yeah, Void Mirror does have a decent amount of applications, you know, outside of shutting out colorless decks. Just kidding, but seriously, anyways, to wrap things up, I have one last thing to say. And that would be hashtag Free Iona. And with that, the show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one.